There have been a lot of videos and blog posts about what you can do to not go insane amidst social isolation. I made my own video, in fact, about that very topic, but one tip I heard from our friend Omar really made an impact on me, and that was to go back through old photos and see if you can't find hidden gems you may not have recognized as gems when you were new to photography, or retouch and salvage old photos like you couldn't do when you didn't know what you were doing. So I've been doing that, and the process has been awesome. I found several photos I passed by originally, others that I just did a horrible job of retouching originally that I'm happy to go back and improve. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about realizing how many stupid moves I made that I regret. Things I wish I could go back and do differently as a photographer. And in sharing these things, I truly hope that I can help some of you newer photographers or even older photographers avoid these same stupid mistakes. The first thing I really regret is my year-long malaise of faded film grading. Looking back at these photos, for me, it's akin to looking back at old photos of regretted style life choices or a bad tattoo. As I look back at these photos, I regret so much my grading decisions, and looking back on it now, I realize that I was duped by the trends. I realize that this look is no longer in fashion, but for those of you with 5 years experience and a decent long-term memory, you'll most likely remember this horrible time for photography. For me, it has been cathartic to go back and be able to hit Control-Z on those otherwise not too horrible shots. But that leads us to my second regret, and that is that I didn't always save the raw or source files for the files that I retouched. There was a time in my photography that funds were extremely tight, and I didn't feel like I could afford the expensive storage that was necessary to store those huge raw files. And I figured, why would I ever want to go back and do anything with these already perfect files? They're as good as they're gonna get. At least that's what I told myself. And probably that was just to feel better about the fact that I was deleting all those raw files. But here we are a mere 4 or 5 years later, and I would pay money to be able to go back and edit certain raw files. But these memories, which I cherish, they will forever be marred by the knowledge that I made some stupid color grading choices. Sure, it's salvageable, and even slight tweaking makes me like them even more, but all that work is very destructive to a JPEG file, and it's less than ideal, and certainly not what I would do with the file now if I had the raw file still. But the reality for most of us is that funds are tight, and it's hard to afford something expensive like a RAID 5 device, which I now have, with tons of terabytes of storage, partly because I never want to lose anything. I recognize that spending a little bit of money now is better than the regret of losing cherished memories later, or a client's work. But all of that would not have been as big a deal if I could just go back in time and do one thing, or if you would implement this one tip, you'll save yourself a lot of pain, and that is to stick with styles, retouching techniques that are classic and timeless. Now, this is just my personal feeling, and there will be those who disagree with me, but the more experienced I get with photography, the less retouching, the less color grading, the less I mess with a photo. I focus on getting things right in camera, and I utilize color profiles that enforce a more consistent style in my photography, also just to make the decision-making process less ambiguous in post and just easier to manage. For those who have followed the channel for a while, you'll recall that Danae and I used to have a host of presets, and we would sell them on our store. In fact, we would develop a new set of color profiles for many new episodes and would promote and sell those presets at the end of those episodes as a way to kind of make some money, but also experiment. Now, unlike many commentators, I don't think that there's anything wrong with selling presets. We purchased many of them when we were learning photography, and it helped us figure out what we liked and what we didn't like. But definitely we did overdo it, and I think a lot of beginner photographers do overdo it. I look back at many of our color decisions and I cringe now. I think that though what many photographers do, and certainly what we did, was we wanted our photos to really stand out. We want to set our work apart from what our friends, families, others are posting on social media, and we want to be seen as a photographer and not just snapshots on Instagram like most people are. And the way to do that, to ensure that people see our photos as something different, we want people to know that we've exercised command over that file, that we've photoshopped or lightroomed it, and that we're not reliant on those silly Instagram profiles like the rest of all of you plebeians are. And so to do that, we kind of tend to overdo it, I think. While it is possible to fine-tune a photo in post by subtly changing curves, dodging and burning, doing white balance tweaking, and subtle tweaks to the color, the key is to go easy. There was a photographer, a wedding photographer, award-winning, and I don't remember his name, but he had a really cool accent. And I took a workshop from him online, and that was how to use flash or strobe photography as a wedding photographer. And he would emphasize not overdoing it, and he would use this phrase he would say all the time. He'd say, just use a kiss of light, just a kiss of light. And then when he said that, the way he said keys, it stood with me. And I can't remember his name, like I said, but I remember that lesson. And I think that also applies to color, sharpening, vignetting, contrast, shadow recovery, clarity, all of those things. We just need a keys of it, not a blast of it. And the other problem is lack of consistency. When I look back at our early headshot photography portfolio, for instance, I think there is some decent work there, probably, but man, it's just all over the place, both in terms of how we would shoot and where we would shoot, but also in terms of color profiles and treatment. These photos look like they could have been taken by a dozen different photographers. So what presets should you use, and how do you commit to a style when you're not even sure what you like? That's a tough question. You might be all over the place at first as you figure that out. It's fine and necessary to experiment. Try the default color profiles from your camera. Play with color profiles in Lightroom and some of the different profiles in Capture One. Try developing your own presets. Try downloading presets from reputable photographers who know something about what they're doing. For instance, one that I still will use on occasion today is Maston Labs. They do an excellent job. Their presets are grounded in color theory and not just a wedding photographer somewhere who thinks that green cross-processing and overexposing everything is what you really need to make your work shine. But those can be fun too. Whatever you do, when you experiment, I would generally encourage you to focus on profiles which are more timeless though. The ones we already know have stood the test of time rather than extreme looks. Extreme looks, I promise you, will go out of style and you will very likely end up looking back, as I am now, despising them. But whatever you do, please do not destroy your source files, because someday you'll have arrived at a post-processing style that you love, which you feel comfortable sticking with potentially for the rest of your career. And when that happens, you'll be very glad that you had a way to hit Control-Z on all of it. But those are just my thoughts. Do you have a similar story, or do you disagree with anything I said? Let me know in the comments below, nicely. And in the meantime, do good with your cameras, because that's what matters more. And I'll talk to you again real soon.